going to do this now. Hi, come here. Cleo. Cleo, there. Here's your fish stick. Cleo likes fish sticks. So, I gave her one. I don't know if you can see her. There she is. Yeah. She'll find it. Hi. She's looking at me. So, I'm going to do this before I lose my nerve. In about 12 hours, we have the 5-year anniversary of my husband's death. Sudden and unexpected death. We were together 29 years. I was diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome when I was 17. I was not told of my diagnosis. I was already in special classes because I had severe depression. And they were very focused on making me college ready, that kind of thing. And they never once looked at what I actually needed was for somebody to teach me how to protect myself from predators. So, I was anybody's victim. It wasn't if, it was when and who. So, it was Ron. And he lived with me for 11 years. Kept saying he wasn't sure. We had commitment issues. I was a messy housekeeper. He didn't want to get married, stuff like that. I was committed to him. He was not committed to me. And he cheated on me at least 4 times that I know about. Yeah, at least 4. Plus, he was doing like this, basically like a phone chat room type stuff. You know, he wasn't like, I don't know if you remember telepersonals, if you were in the Bay Area in the late 90s. That telepersonals, just talking to other women, basically. In addition to the cheating, including with a coworker, and a couple of coworkers actually. So, yeah, he was not respectful, and he did not value me. He did not respect my faith at all. So, late 99, he's playing games. The apartment is in his name, so anytime he got mad at me, he would say, get out, get out, and he would, just basically threaten me with being homeless if I didn't do what he said. And we had the county I lived in had one of those clinics, which I think this is a very valuable thing. It was a sliding scale. I brought a pay stub, and they said, well, we'll charge you $30 for a session with a counselor. So I did that. And it was very interesting how he took the lid off of some things in my life, and I realized I was in an unhealthy relationship. In an hour, and no less. And, thank you, whoever you were. And, I decided, I don't like living in the Bay Area. I've only been living there with Ron. I was in California at the time. I was only there for Ron. I said, forget it. So I got a job in Houston, and I plan to move to Houston. And Ron said, me too. And I said, oh, wait, let me get settled in Houston, and then you can follow. But he knew I was going to leave him. He quit his job that day. Came home, said, I already quit my job, turned everything in, I'm unemployed. I have to go to Houston now. So I was stuck with him. We got to Houston. I said, some things need to change if you want to live with me, because I was finally able. The apartment was in my name for a change. Okay. And that lasted about a year. And he was back to his old tricks. And unfortunately, he talked me into quitting my job and going to work for him, which was a terrible, terrible mistake. I'm glad I had the experience of running my own business. But he used it as a lever on me financially, that he was paying me a small amount and supposed to pay all the bills, and he didn't. And like, even just, he wouldn't let me get his cell phone for a long time. It just, or he got the cell phone and then he stopped making the payments and it kept getting turned off, just, so, he wasn't real happy when I went to the dealer and set up an auto pay on my debit card. And, so then it gets run over, down the road for 10 minutes, comes back. His family said the day of the accident, if he's got permanent damage, we're going to put him in a nursing home. I said, why don't you just buy a gun and shoot him? It would be cheaper. Because I knew what that would do to him. And they now had a lot to say about me for that, because I was an advocate for Ron, because I felt like he needed an advocate. And when I make a commitment to a person, I keep it no matter what. And even though Ron had not made a commitment to me, I'd made a commitment to him. And I did think a couple of late nights in the shock trauma intensive care unit, staring down at Ron, laying in the bed, all those tubes and stuff, the machines all around him. I can just walk away. Nobody is going to point a finger at me if I just walk. But I have to live with myself at the end of the day. And that's not who I am. So I stayed. And I thought, well, here's how the fairy tale goes. He's going to wake up. I'm there at his side. He realizes how he took me for granted, and we're going to live happily ever after. He's going to respect me. He's going to cherish me. He did not. He had the accident in January. He came home for good in April. He was in and out of the hospital for a while. He went back to work in October. Oops, I lost a hush puppy. He went back to work in October. We got married in September. He went back to work in October. And in November, he was binge drinking and choking me out. So, 2003 was not a good year. So, 18 years of that. Binge drinking, abusing me verbally, physically, isolating me. My only friends were online. The men in particular Ron had around him were bad guys who hated women and would have I was very, very careful. So 18 years of that. And in 2016, he started having back trouble. He had an operation, but it didn't fix the problem. He ended up back in the wheelchair. He could stand a little bit, but it was very painful for him. And when they finally did a scan, they found out that his spinal canal was just very compressed, and he would have needed like major surgery. It would have been like a 2-year recovery. I was like, no, I don't want that. But he was a binge drinker, and he was very open about being a binge drinker. And they wouldn't give him narcotics or any kind of pain pills either. So it was a very bad dilemma, and I just had to watch him suffer and scream day in and day out. And the most frustrating thing for me with that was he had a pain doctor, and he would be screaming all night in pain. And the next day he would go in, and the doctor, oh, how's the pain? Oh, not bad. Why are we wasting hours of our day to go see this guy if you're going to lie to him? So, Ron basically retired in 2019. No, 2020 he retired basically, and a couple months later he started having grand mal seizures, and he wouldn't take the medication for like 6 months until one night when he had 7 grand mal seizures in one night that I could track. It was, and he wouldn't let me call 911. So the next day I got him to the hospital, and they gave him some an emergency prescription for Keppra, which did the trick. It was great. Now, my understanding of it at the time and currently is that this stuff works really good. Seizure medicine, if you take it consistently. If it says twice a day, what I did was I gave it every 12 hours on the dot, 4 a.m., 4 p.m., boom, boom, boom. Some people, 6 in the morning, 8 at night. Well, you may not get the same results Ron did because his went away. And he had temporal lobe injury from the accident. It just took apparently 17 years for it to manifest. So after that, he's like, no, I'm not leaving the house unless I have to see a doctor. So he just basically stayed home. He declined. COVID was going on. He was very, very anxious about that. He started losing his faculties over a period of years. It got really bad into the 2020. And it ended up with him incontinent in bed, just basically a vegetable. And I had to take care of him full time and run the business by myself. And I brain damage. And I did it though. Thank you. All things through Christ who strengthens me. So I hung on to my faith, and my faith was the only thing that got me through, because Jesus saved me when I was 13. I was going to kill myself, but he basically put his arm around me and said, this is as bad as it gets. It's never going to be this bad again. I've got plans for you. Just hang in there. And I had been told a few times in my life by people who I believed that God did have plans for me and that I needed to, stay the road. So I did. And after the accident, I got started handing out Bibles. And it started pretty slow. And I was worried what people were going to think about me. And now we have the crazy lady on the street median in Cracktown with the free Bible sign, handing out, a couple dozen at a time. So thank you, Lord. Take care of the recipients. And my faith really anchored me, but Ron would get very, very ugly if I even mentioned God or my faith, or even I'm going to go do my Bible study. He would just go on a tirade. He would follow me when he could walk and shout at me while I was trying to read the Bible. So I started getting up very early before he woke up, and I would do my Bible study. I felt like I was cheating, that I had to sneak around with God. It was ridiculous. And he was just very, very hostile to my faith. And he would make a big production of going with me on Bible handouts now and then, because I believe he thought it made him look good. But he was not what I would say on board. He always resented me for doing that, but he knew that was the one thing I was not going to budge on, is I'm going to share my faith no matter what, however God wants me to do it. So, at work, be a decent worker, be a decent friend, not so much with the overt stuff. Although I do wear my cross. I got it on Walmart.com. About $8. But everywhere else I go, I'm pretty open about my faith and shared as much as possible. And I did have a crisis about 6 months before Ron died, where I just really wondered, is God really in control? And I went back and forth for a while, but I, came back. So, and considering what I was dealing with at the time, I think that's very understandable. And this is nothing God did not already know about. So, and So he asked me to go to the liquor store. Because for a while he was buying these like $30, $40 bottles of alcohol, bringing it home, drinking it all in a day or two, and then he wanted more. We didn't have that kind of money. And I said, Ron, you could get just as drunk on the cheap stuff as you can on the expensive stuff. And he did the math, and he's like, oh, you're right. So, we're talking like below the bottom shelf stuff. McCormick liquor, that was a vodka. That was his favorite. And big plastic bottle. He liked it because it was lighter to lift. But he was legally drunk when he died. I think that's so sad. So he had asked me to go to the liquor store, and I left. I paid a friend to give me a ride. And about halfway there, he called me, and he said, don't forget the orange. I said, oh, you mean the spiced rum? Because he would get his words mixed up. He said, yeah. I said, well, I'll see you soon. I love you. And I hung up. And when I got home, he was dead. It was a heart attack. And they did a very, very thorough investigation. I mean, if something bad, if somebody had hurt Ron, they would have found it. And they were exactly who I would have wanted to investigate. And they did a very good job. They did a very extensive report. But basically, Ron drank himself to death. So, where's that? And I remember I had called 911, of course. And the firemen came first, then the paramedics, then the policemen. And then when Ron was declared dead, the medical examiner's investigator, there were a couple of them, I think. And they were all over the house taking pictures. They wouldn't let me in the house. They know all my business, I'm sure. So I got no secrets. So, but as they were leaving, the one young girl was very worried about me. And she said, are you okay? I said, what do you mean? And she says, you don't have any kids. You don't have any family. I said, my aunt is coming. It's okay. And she said, no, but are you going to be okay? I said, yeah, I'll be okay. It just hasn't hit me yet. And she left, but I could tell she was worried about me. And I realized my prison door had just opened. I was unemployed. I was widowed. I had $16 in my checking account. But God took care of everything. I got a job I enjoy. I have a ministry, which I enjoy tremendously. I have a couple of different angles on the ministry. God can and will use anything for good. But in a lot of ways, the last 5 years have been the best years of my life.